Fascinating, and please stay with me. You know what you sleep off. So Afrofuturism, critical race theory and policing in 2024. As I have such, I found some very interesting videos that I would like to just kind of share with us very quickly, just to kind of help us understand what a lot of scholars have said about Afrofuturism. And I want us to begin to, expand our minds right from the beginning of this conversation and begin to imagine how or in what way we can deploy or use Afrofuturism in our work. I wouldn't want to draw so much on CRT because the first two speakers have talked about how CRT is what should be or is relevant to our work as social inclusion advocates. But one concept that these two speakers haven't talked about is Afrofuturism. And I would like to bring that I would like to emphasize that in my talk and see how that plays out in the article that I had the privilege to go through. So I will play this video very quickly. I'm not going to waste so much time on that. Let's see. Let me share my sound.
And delighted to be a part of this conference. It has been enlightening, exciting, and I am actually touched by the level of.
Give me a moment. Trying to see how I can copy the link and have you share.
Yeah, okay, so you can escape from the PowerPoint session and then just copy it on a web browser and share that.
Thoughtfulness in the programming and the musical showcases and art selections. I think that it makes a great statement about our desire as human beings to want to connect with new ideas or old ideas and use them to really stretch to help us break out of our boxes and to push towards greater heights and to celebrate the beauty of humanity. So I have to thank the organizers for putting this together. I have the honor and privilege, I would say, of being able to go to many places and talk about Afrofuturism. And there's one place where I had a discussion about Afrofuturism that I would like to share with you. When the book first came out, I had an opportunity to speak to a group of fifth graders on the west side of Chicago, and they were a little rambunctious group of kids, a little bit. I was coming to speak to them in their art class. Their instructor asked if I would explain what Afrofuturism was, and all of the students in the class were of African descent. They were all African American, and I was, explaining some of the tenets of Afrofuturism. And at some point, there was some rumblings, and then I asked the students, I said, tell me some ideas you have about the future. What are some things you would like to see in the future? And, one kid raised his hand and he said, well, I would like to see a world without violence. I said, okay. I was thinking he was going to tell stories about.
I'm going to stop right there so I can get back to my presentation and not lose my audience. So there's something I found really fascinating about what this speaker said, which is what I'm going to be using to explain my understanding of this concept. I'm going back to my slide right now. So the question I want to ask everybody is, what's your imagination of a new world? When you think about the future, you think about what can possibly happen in the world differently, what comes to mind? Any thoughts? Is there anyone who wants to volunteer? Do I call names?
Go for it, you got the
Jake?
power.
I'm a little pessimistic.
Okay.
So I don't think it's gonna be great.
Why do you
I feel like between, just thinking globally. Is that what you want me? I can go.
Whichever
Just
way.
thinking globally, I feel like more and more conflicts will continue to kind of go. I mean, she's talked about 2044. This talks about that, but yeah, I can see religion, culture continue to divide people more and more.
Awesome. I don't want you to expand beyond that. Do you have any
So
thoughts?
are you saying like what we want to see or what we expect to see? Because I feel like those are
Wait, I
different.
don't want to see those things.
Those are
but-
different. I feel like those are different questions. Well, I know you answered
Yeah.
that, and I was like, I didn't realize.
So I'm leaving it open-ended. I'm just asking you to take that power of a
I
creative and imagine what would
Yeah.
you like to see, or what's your imagination of a new world?
I want to see a world that is less on the brink of disaster than it feels like now for my daughter. And a world where diversity is the norm, I guess, if that makes sense, so that our family is not just this anomaly.
Mhm. So Courtney says, "Oh, too many thoughts. Do you have anything to say? Do you want to share some thoughts with us?"
Sure. I think about this a lot because I daydream frequently about sort of like goddess spirituality informed queer feminist utopia, or at least my version thereof. And a lot of it for me involves living without all of these like tribalist barriers, eliminating nationalism, which leads to warfare, eliminating massive corporations ruling the world, living in a sustainable way in which women's voices are honored, not exclusively, but just to rebalance the world. I feel like the world is very out of balance, and that's putting it rather euphemistically or lightly.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I think everyone has spoken really well, and I will go to the next slide. Right? Okay. So, what is Afrofuturism? When I first saw that word, I kept asking myself, Afro has to do with Africa, right? And futurism has to do with future. So literally for me, it means a future where Africanism or Africanness or Blackness is at the center. So that was the literary definition that came to mind. But when I went through the article and some other sources, I gained, more insight. And if you remember the video we played, even though the sound wasn't so good, Womack was just talking about interaction with children at a fifth grade school and how she asked them this very question. What would you want to see in the future? What's your imagination? What are you thinking of when you think about, the new world or what the future should be? And so one of the kids said he envisions or envisages a world where there is no violence. I mean, violence is an ambiguous term. I mean, gender marginalization is a form of violence. I mean, from what you just talked about, Jake also made reference to, the fact that yes, he is saying that there might be more challenges as per more violence, more, negativity out there. And so, yes, we can begin to think about this a different way. Perhaps the world will be a good place, or maybe it's going to be a place of more injustice. But as we go along, we'll learn more about Kappa's insight, and then at the end of this conversation, we all can choose whatever perspective we want to, go with. Whether we're envisaging a future where the world is a better place or a place where there will be more injustice. So Capra talks about Afrofuturism and relies, now, based on what I found in the article is actually divided into 3 sections. So in the first section, it talked about Afrofuturism. It talked about the development of Afrofuturism and how this concept evolved over time, just like the critical race theory. And it went on to talk about the different tenets that make up Afrofuturism and how the tenet of Afrofuturism overlaps with critical race theory. So first, Capra uses sorry, let me go to the next point. So I think I've talked about that already. I think I have the slide in my subconscious. So one other thing that I see here is after he took time to define Afrofuturism and the key concept, he went on to kind of set examples by referring to pop culture. Specifically, he tried to explain how Afrofuturism played out in the movie Black Panther. And while we think about that movie, I want each and every one of us to begin to think about other literary works or fiction work or artistic expressions where authors or creatives have tried to incorporate Afrofuturism, or perhaps if it is something that you at one point or the other have also imagined, even in your creative space. I don't know if that makes sense. Are we good? Those online, are we following? Okay, I can't hear anyone. Please, if you want to unmute yourself, go for it. Just to know, I just want to make sure that everyone is with me. I don't like the idea of lecturing. Okay, so let's move on. One other thing that I want to say is, so after Kappa took out time to define Afrofuturism, to talk about how Afrofuturism and CRT interact, he took out time to explain how technology will be used in the criminal justice system. And so we see in the third section of the article, we see Kappa trying to help us understand that in a new future that is emerging, there is going to be so much emphasis on criminal justice and how criminal justice plays out. And at the center stage will be policing. And so policing then in 2044 will take on a new perspective, a new worldview. And so as we're envisaging a new future where, first of all, the Black people or the minority now will become the majority, we're also seeing a world where race would become a dynamic subject. I mean, it will no longer be on the basis of race as in your color. There will be different interpretations of what race really means. And in that new world, we'll see that we would no longer see race as a binary idea of white versus Black. I mean, there will be conversations about how the Latinos fit in, and there will be new concepts. I mean, new concepts will be incorporated in the overall conversation about race and ethnicity. And at the center stage of this futuristic position that Kappa is promoting is the idea that technology will now play a major role. And so I want us to also begin to think of how, when we think about our research or our interest, how exactly what new future are we seeing when it comes to the injustice that is currently being perpetrated in the social advocacy space that we are currently in? Are you perhaps envisaging that there is an Afrofuturistic future in the sense that there is a future for your work, and what kind of future are you envisaging Afrofuturistically? I hope that makes sense to everyone. So what does technology have to do, or what role will technology play in the future that you see, in the future of your work? And of course, what would your role be as a social advocate? So I'm trying to bring the later part of my thoughts forward because of time, knowing that we've really spent a lot of time in the first 2 presentations. So first of all, it makes sense to define Afrofuturism, and this can be understood as a wide-ranging social, political, and artistic artistic movement that dares to imagine a world where African descended peoples and their cultures play a central role in the creation of that world. I said that before. So we're seeing a future where Blackness is celebrated, and at the center stage is Africanness. And there's an interesting video I found on YouTube. I might not be able to play that, but if there is time at the end of this session, I'll just want us to kind of visualize how many creatives in the world of pop culture have tried to deploy Afrofuturism, even though they don't even know that that's what they're doing. And I see very interesting parallels when I think about artists of Nigerian descent. I think about this guy who won the Grammy, Burna Boy, and how he has also continuously deployed, Afrofuturism in his work. And somehow, this is someone who is beginning to present himself as a social advocate even without realizing it. So I think one interesting thing we all need to bear in mind when we think about what Afrofuturism is, it has the nature of someone or an individual trying to promote justice in a world of injustice. So at the core of Afrofuturism is challenging the status quo to create a new order, or perhaps using an old order to recreate one. Does that make sense? Are we together? Those on the Zoom? Okay. Before I read the chat, let me just try to, go a bit and then I'll come back there. So now, I want to talk about the 4 stages of Afrofuturism and how it has evolved. So in the first phase, we have foremost individuals like Mark Derry. And now, before I talk about, Natasha, Mark Derry was the very first person who became associated with this term Afrofuturism. Just like we talk about Kimberly Crenshaw and the CRT, right? So McDerry's definition is that Afrofuturism is speculative fiction that treats African American themes and addresses African American concerns in the context of techno culture. So you see, technology plays a role in the redefinition or in the shifting of the identity of the Black people in the new world that Afrofuturism defines or projects, or envisages rather. So there's another definition here from Natasha. You can read it. I'm not going to read that. But there are key words here that I want us to put at the back of our mind. So Afrofuturism is speculation. So it is speculative in nature. I'm envisaging, I'm thinking, I'm projecting. That's the idea of Afrofuturism. It relies so much on individual imagination in the sense of, this is what I see. You might not see what I see, but my perspective is my perspective. And so it is also subjective, which brings me to the idea that, Afrofuturism has so much to do with critical race theory because of the subjective nature of critical race theory, and the fact that it also relies so much on individual experience. So Afrofuturism somehow relies on individual experience and the creativity of each individual and how they see their world, and of course the new world that they are projecting. So now another thing is Afrofuturism has been significantly or majorly used in the world of pop culture. From the first generation or the first wave of Afrofuturism to the second to the third to the fourth. And why do I say so? We'll find out right now. So I'm moving rather fast because of time. So if you look at the emergence of Afrofuturism, I said that it has been really used or deployed in pop culture. Now, in literature, we think about the first, novels from 1857 to 1904. Many of these works used Afrofuturism even before this term became known as Afrofuturism. And the second wave, which began in 1994 with musical expressions. So the very first work or the very first area where Afrofuturism was used was in the field of literature. And then it went on to involve musical expression. And there are two popular names in the 90s. These names are Sonra and Parliament from Funkadelic. So the third wave, emerged with Octavia Butler. Now, during this time, literary novels continue to exist. So at the center of Afrofuturism are, like I said, are artistic expressions, literary works, either in form of literatures or in form of musical expressions. Now, the fourth wave or the modern wave so far has witnessed Afrofuturistic expressions through pop music. So when you think about pop music, think of names like Beyonce, Sholange, and that's why I would really want to play that video where this woman has greatly deployed Afrofuturism, and as well as some other musicians. So now, fun facts. Is everybody here? You don't want to miss this fun fact. Can someone unmute online so I know some folks, everyone is following?
I'm here.
Yeah.
Good.
Here.
So fun fact, I want to talk about the way Afrofuturism works and how mysticism is an integral aspect of Afrofuturism. So remember I talked about imagination, and interestingly, the human mind can travel really wild, right? And so one interesting thing that Afrofuturists have continuously done is that they have tried to use their imagination by connecting themselves with deities or mystic practices, especially of the Egyptian world. And I find this really interesting because of my background in classics. And I was like, this is just for me. So interesting because my master's thesis was on the cultural diffusion of ISIS religion in Roman Christianity. Now, I'm not going to talk about that, but my focus is how mystery religion, what was the nature of mystery religion in the ancient Egypt or in ancient Egypt, and how as this practice evolved to become something that a lot of Afrofuturists have deployed in their work in order to create imaginations about the future. Now, one interesting thing about the ISIS religion is the fact that, so first of all, who was Isis? Isis was an Egyptian goddess of afterlife. So the afterlife for everyone is a place of order, is a new world where there is peace, where there is justice. Now, there's a key concept in the ISIS religion called Mat. Mat is spelled as M-A-A-T, M-A-A-T. Now, what does Mat mean? Mat literally translates as justice. And so in the afterlife, there is a scale, like there is the right side, there's the left side. And so if you have done good, you go to the right. And if you've done evil, you go to the left. And so everyone who accept the Isiac mystery religion wanted an afterlife wanted a situation where they could connect with Isis in the afterlife and have that life of order, of peace, of tranquility. And so everyone in the ancient Egyptian society identified with Isis religion in order to gain entrance into afterlife. And the idea that there is eternity and there is a good life on the other side. And this is something that a lot of Roman politicians, think about Julius Caesar, a lot of them deified themselves and began to associate themselves with gods or a goddess such as Isis in order to reclaim their identity. And I see how, if you look at this image here, you see how, what's her name, Beyonce, is representing herself in that image and likeness of the goddess Isis, with that confidence, with that authority as that of a king. And there's another video that I found online that I added to my slide where she was kept saying, I'm a king, I'm a king, I'm a king, you know. This is someone who is trying to reclaim a new identity by looking at the past and trying to reclaim the future. So you will see scenes in some of our in some of the music videos about how she would, you know, go into the water, go into the underworld, trying to get power and use the past to reclaim identity or represent a new person or a new image in the future. And this is something that I think is very interesting because for one, Beyonce represents the minority, and everything that I see in many of the recent music videos that she has produced is the idea that we are creating a new world where blackness is power, blackness is king, and if you take if you pay close attention, you see that a lot of times the white people are the servants or the maids or the aides in many of those music videos. And so for some school of thought, and that's why I want to say that some Afrofuturists belong to that school of thought that when we have that new order, the dystopia kind of world, we're going to be creating a world where blackness is power and we would hurt and continue to, we would create a new world where the white people are slaves and we are, you know, we belong to the capital, to the capitalists, while the white people belong to the low class. And of course, that's the dystopia idea that, you know, Kappa talked about in addition to the utopia idea he mentioned in the later part. I would run really quick because of time. So now, I think I already talked about this. So now, some of the tenets of Afrofuturism that I think I find very interesting that also overlap or, you know, connect with CRT are inclusion and deconstruction of Black identity through rearticulation. And this is something that a lot of artists have done in using musical videos, even in literature. And for instance, you see Octavia Butler in a novel, Bloodchild. In this novel, we see a situation where men got pregnant. This is a new order. And this, for me, represents the order that the ISIS religion represents. So in the ISIS religion or mystic practice, the woman can, men can actually get pregnant. Like Isis' husband Osiris, took in and gave birth. It's such an interesting concept. And so it is so fascinating to know that many of these, writers have really traveled wide in the world in their minds and are beginning to, imagine a new world where there is genderlessness. And for me, the idea that men can get pregnant is recreating what gender is and trying to, deconstruct the existing notion of what gender is or what femininity is or of what masculinity is. And so we're not just seeing race being an integral part of Afrofuturism, we're seeing gender, we're seeing classlessness. And so Nnedi Okorafor is another writer who, in a book, Who Fears Death, focused really on the theme of gender freedom, right? And this is something that the ISIS religion also represents. Alienation and reclamation is another tenet that I find really interesting. So according to Karl Marx, alienation suggests that capitalist system puts people in conditions that separate them from the experiences, meaning that we create a world where people don't even understand what they're going through. They are meant to believe that that is what they deserve. That is who they are supposed to be. But one of the tenets of Afrofuturism is to create a world where people are not alienated from their experiences. Rather, they try to understand who they are, and they are able to own up their own individuality and claim their identity based on even the very traumatizing or traumatic experiences of the past and use those experiences to chart a new course for themselves and for the future. So through Afrofuturism, people can actually claim their traumatic experiences. I think I talked about that already. So one question that I want to ask everyone is, does anyone have thoughts on creative works where any of the tenets of Afrofuturism has been deployed to reshape the experiences of people in a culture you have read about or you are a part of? I will call names.
Oh,
Okay, great. Someone is speaking. Thank you.
oh yeah, it's Alex. I now it's my time to shine with Marvel nerd knowledge. So I was really excited reading this about Black Panther, the movie. I am deeply invested in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Well, I used to be, not as much anymore. And Marvel recently came out with a show called What If? I don't know if folks are watching that, that explores like alternate versions of stuff that's happened in the anyway. So one of the episodes they just did, like the second or third episode, was if T'Challa, the king of Wakanda, was abducted by the aliens who took Peter Quill and he became Star-Lord, and what that would look like. And I was really impressed with how they there's very like you don't get much more futuristic, I think, than exploring like space travel and you know, being so, I don't know. And anyway, so and in this episode T'Challa is the one who like unifies the Ravagers, and they become like a heroic sort of entity as opposed to the original, right, where they're pirates and sort of. And I thought it was really telling and like really poignant that they took the original timeline, which centers a white man as the only like human, especially in a franchise where all the other people of color were aliens. They didn't get to be human beings. There are no people of color in the Guardians of the Galaxy who get to be human beings of color. It was really poignant to take like the tenets of Black Panther and then push it further, and really look at like, I don't know, just like what this, and he gets to go back to Earth and return to Wakanda and return to, and like throughout the show, like the MCU has a lot of problems with it. I'll start with that. But throughout the show, they've had like at least a couple episodes where Wakanda has been like the last bastion of humanity, where T'Challa and Okoye got to like really express like what humanity can be if we were to just let ourselves be removed from all this other, you know, crap.
Thank you
And it's, yeah.
so much. Okay. Were you going to say something else, Alex?
No, I think I'm just rambling at this point because
I just want to make sure, I mean, that I'm not shutting you off. Okay, so Shalonda has something to say. Please go ahead.
I love that little hand thing. So I wanted to say, so to your question, I'm thinking about something. So when I think about Afrofuturism, of course, and especially with your examples, we go to like the artist. And I'm thinking about, first of all, I want to mix kind of like Key Amber's conversation about code switching. And she mentioned, you know, and I know that as a Black woman, that's something that we do. But also I think what intersectionality and critical race theory teaches us, and now bringing into conversation about Afrofuturism, is that we get to see through multiple lenses. So we know it's not just Black folks that code switch. So when I answer this question, I want to talk about how intersectionality has made me think about issues, or not think about, because I always have been thinking about it because my son is a gay man, but has made me ask different questions that I may not have asked before. So I'm thinking about this question. I'm thinking about what Lil Nas X is doing, pushing back on like issues of gender, but not only that, gender and race, and like catching hell because of it. So if you know, like his new album, he's marketing it, it's, I don't know if this is the cover of his album or just a marketing thing to like talk about his new album. He's pregnant, right? And it's a maternity shoot, and he's saying he's pregnant with his new album. Well, he's catching hell, right? Here's this black man who we did not talk about that, right? And he's like playing against all these gender norms, but he's envisioning and doing something about a future where black men can claim, right, their identities that push beyond what we've said, what it means to be a black man. And so when I think about what he's doing, it's really, really interesting to me. So I think just kind of thinking about that is,
Thank
you know,
you. Thank you
yeah.
so much. So I'm just going to read some of the chats here. Okay, so Courtney said, in modern occult practices, the so-called left-hand path of magic is often viewed as evil, dark, satanic. I'm not personally a practitioner of left-hand magic, but it gets an unjustly negative reputation in the society. I agree. So wow, I remember reading about Isis Osiris myth. It's such a fascinating myth. Everyone should go read it. And I was fascinated by how she blah 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 blah. Yeah. So a couple of years ago, I read McKinney's A Blade So Plain is a spin on Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, where Alice is a black or brown teenager fighting organized white crime. It's fantastic. Thank you for this. Okay, very noble viewer for futurism. I wish I was more well versed in it than I am. Oh, okay, now you know. I did it about. Okay, so thank you all for your thoughts. I will just move real quick. How many more minutes do we still have?
About 8 minutes.
Oh no.
Okay,
Okay,
so
so
you touched on really valuable.
yeah, I'm not going to talk about Black Panther again, but this is a prototype that was used by Kappas, and many of the themes that that Afrofuturism is about were really, demonstrated in the movie Black Panther, and I think we can also see that in other examples of pop culture that I may not be able to talk about here. So I want to say that the movie is Afrofuturistic because it's an imaginative, creative vision of a future for Black people in a world where, despite the existence of criminal issues, there is justice for the colored and the equitable distribution of economic and political power. Now, okay, so I will skip this part. Now, let me talk about some of the themes of CRT that resonate with Afrofuturism. So CRT, one thing is race is biologically significant as it is socially constructed. And so Afrofuturism helps us to expand our imagination and think about race differently. So we're thinking about, when I think about the biological idea now, I'm beginning to ask myself, what exactly is gender? What exactly is race? So what was race before race was defined as it is right now? And what can I possibly reimagine race to be? American legal system is structured to keep some people oppressed. And now when we think about Afrofuturism informs or re-educates us and helps us to shift our focus and understand that it is possible to actually have a world where there is no oppression and a system where the legal system actually is about justice and equity. Colorblind laws foster marginalization. Through the lens of Afrofuturism, we can imagine a world where colorblindness is no longer exists, just like Kiamba also emphasized in our presentation. And so we were projecting that the future is a place where there is no marginalization. Minority law reforms are only advanced when they favor the white minority. Now we're saying that through the lens of Afrofuturism, the future can be a world where the white people become the minority, whereas the Black people or people of color become or belong to the majority. Now, there is intersectionality here, and an individual is not described in isolation of his or other social constructs. So when we think Afrofuturistically, we're saying that yes, intersectionality does exist, but we're saying that we could try to understand some of the other experiences that make one person in order to reshape or recreate the identity of that being. Race is everywhere. And so one thing that I find really interesting is the fact that there is nothing new really. And so when we look back, we can actually see the, the future that we hope to create from past events or past experiences. And so experience for me is everywhere. Identity is everywhere, but we can actually learn to create what we want to create by going into the past and using, some of these past events to create the future. Personal narrative or story can engage popular legal narratives, and this is something that Afrofuturism is about, trying to what challenge existing narratives and create new ones. Change is possible through radical interventions, and this is also something that is at the core of Afrofuturism. Now, one interesting thing that Kappa adds to the conversation about Afrofuturism is to be able to carry out this change, there must be policing. And so that's why I want to go into Afrofuturism and how policing in 2024, 2044 rather, 2044 should be, or what it should look like. First, I will talk about inclusion. So here we're saying that there will be a world where it will not only focus on issues, we will not only focus on issues of marginalization that affect African Americans or that affect Latinos or other colored people, including people like me from Africa, right? As they, So the second thing is new trends will emerge. So we'll not only talk about issues of binary issues, like I said at the earlier part of this conversation. There will be multiple issues to discuss, to engage with, issues of immigration, because there might be many more people, even from Africa, coming to America or trying to shift and I think at the core of this new trend is the idea of cultural diffusion. So when I think about how Egyptian Isis moved into Rome and how she shaped the narrative of Christianity and how the religious system in the ancient Roman society was. And that's because of cultural diffusion. And so when there is new trend, there will be immigration. And so when there is immigration, new identities will be created. And so people will take on new identities that they had never seen or they have never been a part of, just because they are beginning to, because of what immigration can do. I don't want to focus so much on that because of time. CRT, okay, so one thing that I wrote here is CRT is dynamic and suited for understanding or engaging any culture where power dynamics are at work. And so is Afrofuturism. That's one interesting thing they have in common. And so now, before I conclude, I want to say that there's something very interesting that I need to talk about, which is the idea of policing in 2024. And so for Kappas, is envisaging that yes, we're projecting that there will be a new world where race will be viewed differently, where gender will be viewed from diverse lens or perspectives. Now we're also envisaging what can criminal justice look like. And so for him being a lawyer, with interest in technology, he's projecting that we're going to have a new world where policing can either lead to dehumanization or humanization. Now, these are words that I kind of incorporated in this later part because he didn't say anything about dehumanization or humanization. But there are two words he used, utopia and dystopia. And so for me, my understanding of dystopia, according to based on my interpretation, is that dystopia is dehumanization, while utopia would bring about humanization. 1 minute. Oh my God.
We got
Okay,
7:30 now. 7:29.
Okay, so in conclusion, what I want to say is that first of all, purpose helps us to imagine a world of dehumanization, where yes, Black is now the majority, and in that world of dehumanization, we can see the Black people doing everything they have actually criticized the white people about. That is the idea of dehumanization. And so to ensure that there is justice, there must be policing. And so policing now would involve the use of surveillance cameras, and there will be emphasis on not just policing on individuals going out there, because what is actual projection is that crime will so much would reduce. And so when there is reduction in crime, there will be less emphasis on using human power to promote justice. Rather, there will be emphasis on camera surveillance and the use of big data. Now, I have a question that I want to ask everyone, which is, so let me talk about my reflection very quickly. I said that the author's identity.
I think you've run out of time.
Okay, so my question for everybody.
Good summary. And so,
can I share my conclusion, please?
I think everybody's going to run out of time.
All right. I can just share that with the audience here. I will say that I envisage the future for me when I think about Afrofuturism and my work. I say we can imagine a new world for marginalized people, a world where where identities are reshaped. A formidable tool for ensuring that is pop culture. And as I think about the context of Afrofuturism and CRT as a theory and the idea of policing, I envisage a 24/4 for left-handed people, where there are left-handed cars, kitchen utensils are available. We have specifically customized, which is specifically customized to meet the needs of Southpaws of African descent. And we say the future where if a left-handed child is shamed, there are surveillance cameras to capture instances of stigmatizing remarks which are made about lefties. And even more, I see a world where there will be more left-handed artists, left-handed greeters, and African parents watching shows in my native language, which literally means a folklore of leftists. So
you got the slides up there on the blackboard, right?
Yeah.
So I think people can be able to see. Since we run out of time, sorry about that.
No time,
But
okay.
appreciate your presentation. Thanks so much. And thanks for all of you for your conversations and fantastic job.